Hello and welcome to Mallory Park on the hottest day of the year, and this hot, scorching track action behind me is the Classic Thunder Race and the Classic Saloon Car meeting here at Mallory Park this weekend. We're here with them. More of that in a minute. Here's a taste of what's coming up on this week's show. In this week's start line, we give you the lowdown on the 360s, handbrake turn and reverse flick as we take you through the paces of auto testing. Our star turn this week is MALLETT man made good and one of the nicest men in British racing, touring car star Will Hoy. This week's race action comes from North Yorkshire, from Croft Circuit, around at the Formula 600 Championship. And in Clubman's Corner, the man who swaps classic for racing suit every Sunday, it's the Flying Vicar, Barry Whitehead. Yes, welcome to Mallory Park. As I said, we're here for the Classic Saloon Car race. And in fact, the entire meeting, Mark II Jaguar there, these are the sort of cars that you and I, if you're over 30 like me, will remember from our youth. Triumph Dolomites, Capris, Escorts, the whole works. This, the immaculately prepared Sam Cooke Ford Capri Mark I, running in the post-historic Touring Car Champions. Look at that, Batmobile. Other cars here at the circuit today, Tuscans. And the cars preparing to go out in the post-historic race. Looked a bit like a Capri Fest, I have to say. Well, some cars you might recognise from tracking you down on the highways. The oft-used Police SD1 there, and other cars running in today's meeting, such as the Sports Saloon Championships, the Ace Vehicles Delivery Championships. Most of these cars are prepared by their owners, lovingly prepared, I have to say. This, the Dutch entry, which is the BMW 2002 Ti, a very rare car these days. Everything going through scrutineering. Immaculate standards of preparation on many of these cars. The name on the cylinder head says it all. And the MG Championship running alongside them today. Huge number of MG Maestros and Montegos. Very cheap to buy, very cheap to run. And this is the sort of racing you could get into if you fancy a bit of nostalgia. Not too much expense. Of course, as always, it depends on how big your purse is as to how competitive your car can be. But by and large, the cars are run to the rules and regulations they would have been when the cars were produced in the first place. Just catching sight here of a Mark III Cortina. In fact, the only one there. Terrific to see it out. And these really are proper race cars, as you can see as they get inside. All stripped out, ready to go. Race seats, full harnesses, the works. Terrific day's action in store, and an enormous crowd, I have to say, lining up to watch this, the post-historic touring car race. Dolomite's a great favourite. That, the XJ12 of Brian Stevens, the only one in its class, I have to say, was on handicap. It ran in this class. Mini 1275 GT Mark I Escorts, and the last car you saw there was a Toyota. Nice to see it out. Triumph Dolomite whizzing straight out in front. Nigel Garrett in the Dolomite Sprint. There's that XJ12 of Brian Stevens. And an NSU. Engine in the rear, of course. Not to be confused with a Renault 8 R8 Gordini, which it looks rather like, I have to say. You see what I mean about Capri Fest? Enormous amount of them. And look at this. Wonderful to see the Mini Cooper up against some bigger machinery. Amount of negative camber on those front wheels to keep it on the track, but of course it's no good if it doesn't go. That is Simon Dawson's Mini Cooper expiring in the pit lane. These cars making a wonderful evocative sound of the 70s and early 80s. Appeals to everybody, everybody appreciated it. And as organiser Peter Mallett explains, anybody can get involved.
Peter, presumably this is the sort of racing people come and see because 10 or 15 years ago they were out there doing it themselves.
Yeah, and you can also identify with the cars. I mean, if you take some of the other formulae like the single seaters and so on, it's very difficult for the average punter, shall we say, to to understand what's going on. You know, slipstreaming and so on is a nice technical term, but if you don't see actual overtaking, then really it loses its point.
Presumably half the battle is having a shape out on the track that people can recognise. They can look at it and say, oh look, Mark 1 Escort, I had one of those.
That's right, the shopping car Grand Prix.
Now, how fast has the series grown over the last few years?
Well, in 1974, I think it started with about maybe a dozen competitors, which was then just the classic Saloon Car Championship. A bit later on it developed, but during that time I think they expanded to what we have now, which is really full grids for the later championships, because the cars are much more available. So you'd have had a dozen, say, to start with. Then you would move on to the historic touring cars, and again start off with a dozen, expand to full grids, and as you can see today we've got I think there were 20 in that championship today. Then it moved on again to bring in the pre-74 post-historics, and again it started with about a dozen cars. Now it's full grids, 26 cars here, 28 is the maximum that you can get on this grid.
So with all the classes that are turning up at each meeting, how many cars are you having turn up in total?
The average entrance, the average entry for a meeting is between 75 and 80 cars. I think here we've got about 90, but I guess that's the weather.
Now, if you're like Peter Mallett, you're lucky enough to have bought your first car for 50 quid and then built it up from there. But some people have actually found cars they've had in the past. Come over here. This car here, number 27 Capri, belongs to a young chap called Graham Scarborough. Graham.
Hi, hello there.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah,
right?
fine, thanks. Yeah, very well. Very well. Nice to see you.
Now, I understand that this car has a sort of long history with you.
Well, it has got a bit of a history, I have to say, because this was a 1981 production saloon car that was built by Jerry Marshall Racing for Jerry and I to race in the 81 24-hour race at Snetterton, together with Derek Shortall from Ireland and David DaCosta. And we actually came second in that car in that year. And unfortunately, in the middle of the night, it got rolled, but we still managed to finish second. So, I was actually the first person to drive the car when it was built new for racing, although it actually wasn't mine. So, but now it is, so it's great.
So there you go. If you get involved in the post-historics, you can race against a proper racing driver. This is the post-historics, lining up. Just look at that. I remember these. In fact, one of the first books my father ever bought me on motor racing had nearly all of these cars in it. Jaguar XJ12 versus Mazda RX-3 on the front there. And away they go. And just look at the superior torque of that Jaguar. Brian Stevens pulling away from just about everybody. Poor old NSU down the back. Of course, these cars became very, very famous in the hands of Tom Walkinshaw and the TWR team. With fantastic noise as they stream past the pits. Escorts and Capris abounding. There's a spattering of other cars in there, Triumph Dolomites and this, the NSU. Remarkably, there are 3 at the event. Big crowd turning out today, the weather obviously helping. And the Mark II Jags running alongside the post-historics, providing a little bit of entertainment for everybody. In fact, there were 5 Escort Mark 1s in this race, 6 Capris, and the Mark II Jag also running in this class. This is the Group A race. We were talking to Graham Scarborough earlier. And a lot of these cars you'll recognise from in your driveway only about 10-15 years ago. There is the aforementioned Mr. Scarborough screaming through second place there, I noticed. Amazing to think that about 15 years ago you've been paying 50 or 100 quid for these cars. In fact, you can still pick some of them up for about the same price. They're MOT failures, as Peter Mallett ably demonstrated. Join us later on in the show. We'll be coming back to Mallory Park, talking to a few more people, seeing a few more cars, and just generally wallowing in 1970s and early 80s nostalgia. That'll all be in part 4. Join us then. Our race action this week is coming from Croft in North Yorkshire, the Oil Extreme Formula 600 Championship. Slicks and wings for the common man. And the man to watch is on the left-hand side of your screen on row 1, James Pickford. He is the man who is going to try and emulate Johnny Molam and win every single round of a championship. He is the current champion, but he's beaten into the first corner by Stefan Hodgetts. And that, number 14, is David Taylor. He goes off very first time, trying to make up places. He won't be popular with anybody coming through that chicane. Look at the amount of rubbish he's deposited on the track. Oh, poor old David. He really does try. David Taylor from Harlebury. His car being run by the Mike Haines racing team. And Stefan Hodgetts is valiantly keeping the hard-charging James Pickford at bay. And looking back down the field, I saw a very, very good start from Harry Handkammer. Terrific start, in fact, from Harry Handkammer. He's made 2 or 3 places immediately. Chris Ellis running up there as well in 4th. But Stefan Hodgetts really having to fight hard to keep off James Pickford, and he's just pushed it a little bit too hard. 2 wheels on the dirt, and that has allowed Pickford to slide through as they go into the complex for the first time. And James Pickford will be looking to put the hammer down now and open up a gap to Stefan Hodgetts, both of them experienced kart drivers. And Hodgetts is not going to let him get away with it easily. They really are the class of the field at the moment as they go down the long start-finish straight. James Pickford looking in his mirror, he's obviously a bit worried. Hodgetts is going to push him all the way as they come through the chicane. Not seeming to be affected at all by David Taylor's gravel spraying exercise. And down towards Tower, I think James Pickford looks as though he's carrying more corner speed than Stefan Hodgetts, which is surprising. Hodgetts is closing right up under braking, and Pickford seems to be pulling away through the corner. And they're pulling out a handy little lead over Anthony Nicklin in 3rd place. Car 21 further down the field, that's Andrew Davis from London. A good battle going on for 6th and 7th there. And it looks like Davis is going to get taken as they go into the next corner. As we join the leaders down at Sunny Inn. And they really are going at it hammer and tongs. Pickford constantly looking in his mirrors, he's worried. And I'm not surprised because Stefan Hodgetts is right on it. And we look back down the field. Oh, that's a class overtaking move. That really is class. Nick Farley going past them like they weren't even there as they come through Sunny. Later on the brakes and goes past Andy Sale, James Pickford's teammate. Terrific piece of overtaking. James Pickford and Stefan Hodgetts go through Clearvaux again for the 3rd time, and I think, in fact, that Anthony Nicklin, putting in a sterling drive, being untroubled by anybody else, is slightly closing on them. While those two battle it out of the front, 3rd place, Anthony Nicklin is coming up on them. And Jan Prowse, Chris Ellis and Harry Handkammer, who got a good start. They're all bearing down on 3rd place man Anthony Nicklin. As they go through Tower Bend down towards the Jim Clark S's, Stefan Hodgetts is really not letting James Pickford have an easy run of it. And that's Andy Sale. He's trying to get back past Nick Farley again as they go into Tower, but Farley's not going to have any of that. That was a terrific piece of overtaking, and he looks set to close up on the man in front of him. Oh my God, look at this. Really, really close stuff. And you see what I mean? James Pickford is able to carry more corner speed, and he's getting about 3 or 4 car lengths away from Stefan Hodgetts through a corner. Terrific piece of driving. No lack of guts from Stefan Hodgetts. None at all. As they go past the hairpin. Oh my word. You won't believe it. Yep, it's David Taylor again. David Taylor trying hard to make up all that lost ground. It looked like he'd been doing it as well. That's the trouble. If you push it really hard, something like that may easily happen. These cars are very, very, very grippy. But like all slicks and wings, when they do go, they go big style. I know, I've spun them myself. James Pickford leading, and he takes a very wide line to enter the chicane. Stefan Hodgetts. Looks like that gap is about to close up again. Hodgetts is definitely much later on the brakes. He's going to have a go. He's going to have a go. Oh, just can't make it quite close enough. I'm surprised he didn't dive down the inside then, that tower. James Pickford is a worried man. He keeps looking in his mirrors, and there's that battle further down the field. And I think that Nick Farley is going to make another place. And Harry Hankamer's going to... Andy Sale's going to tag onto him. Yes, Nick Farley easily goes past Martin Wood. Martin Wood, of course, well-known Formula Ford 1600 racer. Oh my word, this really is remarkable stuff. Hodgetts giving it absolutely everything, and look at the amount of time that James Pickford is glancing in his mirrors. He's a worried man. Little lock up there, I think, from Pickford as they go up to the hairpin again. Lap 5. Further down the field, that's Chris Ellis, Hankamer. Danny Reeves making a bit of a charge. And I think Stefan Hodgetts may have made a mistake in the hairpin, because it looks to me as if James Pickford is pulling out some distance. He is indeed. He's pulled out about 4 car lengths, and those two have pulled out an enormous gap on Anthony Nicklin, who's being challenged pretty strongly now by Jan Prowse, Chris Ellis, Harry Hankamer, and Danny Reeves coming through. Oh my word, he's been bulked. James Pickford has hit a back marker coming out of the chicane, and he won't be pleased with him at all, because Stefan Hodgetts has nipped up the outside, and as they go into tower, they're still in traffic, dart through, and Hodgetts is going to have to make the most of this now, because James Pickford is not going to be a happy bunny, and he's going to be right on his tail and pressing. That is absolute disaster for James Pickford. He was unsighted as he came through the chicane, and the poor old back marker was just there, too slow. He went straight into the back of him. And will his record remain? I think Stefan Hodgetts may be able to pull something out here. Oh! Oh, Stefan. You had it in the bag, and you pushed too hard, and now you can't get the engine started. Flames coming out the back, and James Pickford is on his way to another victory. I think the car will be understeering badly now because of that bent front wing. It's remarkable how much even little wings like these will make a difference on a car like this. Take them off, it will be so much slower, and just bend it a little bit like that. That's Stefan Hodgetts. He's back on the track again, and we're not sure where he is, but he's going to be a long way back now. And a remarkable piece of racing by James Pickford. His whole season he's dominated this series, which tends to be a mixture of young karting guns and older experienced clubmen, making a fantastic mixture. And that of course means that this car number 26 of Anthony Nicklin, has moved up to 2nd place, and he will now have seen that Stefan Hodgetts was lying out on the side at sunny out, and he will be putting the hammer down as much as he can. Those back markers still having their own personal battle. As Jan Prowse goes past them, again carrying more corner speed. You can see in straight line terms there's not much difference, but under braking you never know. And in fact, Chris Ellis and Nick Farley all catching up on those 2 back markers. Will they get past them? Yep, they're safely past them. I beg your pardon, that isn't Nick Farley. That's Danny Reeves, of course. And he's got past Hankamer, and he's pressing Chris Ellis very hard now for 4th. Good scrap going on for the lower places. They'll have all have seen Stefan Hodgetts, and they all know there's a podium place in store if they race hard enough. And there is Anthony Nicklin. He has been catching him hand over fist because of that bent wing on James Pickford's car, but just not fast enough. James Pickford takes the win to maintain his unbeaten record. Anthony Nicklin coming over the line second, and isn't he a pleased man?
Well, we've just had news we've won the championship this year now with 3 rounds to go, so I'm really happy about that. It gives me a chance to do something else later on in the year, and I can just sort of ease off with this championship a little bit. But I'm really happy that we've shown it up this early on in the season, so that's great for the sponsors as well.
Now many of us dream of making it to professional motorsport from club level. One man who has, through Mallett's, is touring car ace Will Hoy.
Presumably in your youth you were an active sportsman. And why did you take up motorsport rather than anything else? I mean, you could have been a cricketer or an equestrian or something.
Well, you haven't seen me play cricket, but actually equestrian is quite relevant because I grew up on a farm, and if you look back actually, before the advent of sort of karting became really strong and was the main avenue now for training young drivers, a lot of successful racing drivers had a farming background. For one reason or another. And you look at people like, well, obviously Jim Clark is one obvious example, but there's people in my era, I mean Kenny Atchison, David Sears, a number of drivers grew up in a farm environment, and they were driving cars at a very young age, you know, at the age of sort of, I was driving around an old banger at the age of about 9 or 10. You know, but by the time we were sort of 12 or 13, we were very accomplished drivers and spent the whole time going sideways in these cars, and we went through a series of sort of old bangers and things, and it was great fun.
How did you move on to karts? Did you actually feel the urge to compete against other people other than your immediate family and your friends?
Yeah, well, it sort of started again. I had a school friend who had a sort of fun kart and sort of badgered my dad to sort of get us a kart for Christmas and all things to drive around the farm. And which my brother and I, you know, eventually we badgered him enough and we got it, and I think within 3 weeks we'd absolutely knackered the engine, just sort of blown it apart. So the next big sort of step was to buy an engine twice the size, which we managed to get an engine double the size of this thing, kart, and eventually we got this, and we had to do a lot of it ourselves as well, so it was teaching you a lot about mechanical things. And we put this engine in. I remember the first time we ran it, got it going, it actually ran backwards in 4 gears rather than forwards, so it was a slight mistake.
Now I was just looking at some of your photos earlier, and saw you in your clubman car, a MALLETT.
Yes.
Now there's not too many of those around now. I saw a couple at the weekend, but what was it like to drive?
MALLETTs were brilliant. They're brilliant cars. Yeah, I mean I mean, good old Arthur Mallett, his you know, the old major who died a couple of years ago. Great character, really eccentric, and I mean I always call him, he's the sort of classic string merchant. I mean, he'd hate me saying this probably, but he always imagined everything was measured by a piece of string, you know, rather than anything particularly more technical, and it was built in a stable up at Road in Northants. But what wonderfully competitive and strong cars, and very adaptable. They've been competitive in so many different environments, you know, on the track, on a hill, and sprints or what have you. And it's a great car for a clubman because you can buy a car and like 8 years later it's still competitive, you know, with a few small modifications which you can do yourself. Perfect, you know, perfect sort of cheap racing car. Lots of thrills, high speed, strong if you have an accident, all that sort of thing.
If you were starting off again now in today's racing world, or even drawing on your own experiences, there's people out there going to be watching this saying, you know, I'd like to do what Will does. You know, how would you say is the best way to come up through motorsport now, club motorsport, to get where you want to get?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to find out about your own abilities. I mean, if you're young enough, then karting is the obvious route because it teaches you all the basic skills of, you know, close combat, even, you know, the actual contact, you know, and all the sharp honed skills you need, the competitiveness, you know, all those sort of racing skills that one needs. I mean, ultimately you've got to choose. I mean, everybody has an ambition, I suppose, if they feel they've got the talent, whether it's Formula One, maybe there's some people nowadays say they want to be touring car drivers, or some people say they want to be sports car drivers, but I guess everybody really, if they're young enough, say really what they want to do is be a Formula One driver, because that has to be the goal. But at some stage they have to, and you see this quite a lot, I think, you see people who even though everybody else sees they haven't got the talent to be a Formula 1 driver, they still believe they've got the talent to be a Formula 1 driver. And you see them wasting lots of sponsorship or their own money or whatever it is. And it's a shame that you have to have this, you have to be able to realise at some stage what your talent is and how far it really can take you. Because, you know, there are only very few people who are going to make it to Formula 1. And so I think if you have that realisation at some stage, then you can redirect your career and make a great success of it and become a professional at whatever international level you can get to. So I think there's those sort of two things are very important to realise ultimately how far you really can go, and initially make sure you're in a category where you've got the right amount of funding to keep on winning or being on the podium on a regular basis, rather than trying to do something you haven't got the right budget for, which is just therefore you're going to sort of disappear out of the category halfway through the season. But it's also a lot of luck comes into it. You've got to make the right decision, and luck's got to go with you. But no, it's a great sport to be in, and I've had a lot of fun, and I'm still having a lot of fun. And in the end of the day, you've got to enjoy yourself, haven't you?
So Will Hoyt is a happy man?
Oh yeah, very much so.
To Silverstone, and as you can see from the action going on all around me, driving skills are the order of the day. We've come along to take a look at what skills and techniques are involved during an auto test, and it's exciting stuff, believe me.
Yes, this week on Start Line, one of the branches of motorsport you can get into for next to nothing. Look at this. Auto testing, basically a trip around cones, showing off your driving skills. Can be done in any car, from a saloon to a specialist.
Well, we needed to put someone through their paces, but after that close encounter, I decided it certainly wasn't going to be me. So we've enlisted the help of top sports car driver Chris Goodwin, and here he is. Chris, welcome. Now, are you looking forward to this?
Well, I'm not too sure, having just seen what you've been through.
It wasn't that scary.
It was from where I was standing, I'll tell you. But no, the guys look like they know what they're doing, so we'll see.
It looks a lot of fun.
It does, and it could be a lot of fun if you don't know what you're doing. So we're about to find out how difficult this thing really is.
This a brand new experience for Chris Goodwin. More used to keeping the car stuck to the track than making the back end break away. First thing, Paul LEYSER, his instructor, is teaching him how to do some of the basic manoeuvres. 360 there for Chris, knocking over cones but having a good time. How does Paul sum up his performance?
Paul, how did Chris get on?
I thought for the first time he was excellent, actually. It's very difficult to be thrown in at the deep end and do as well as that. So a long way to go, but I think he'll feel himself how much improvement he's going to make during the day.
Now, he's used to, as you know, driving sports cars. What mistakes was he making in comparison to doing an auto test?
Well, he's used to driving a car that's got 650 brake horsepower. This one's only got 160, which is still quite a lot. It's a lot lighter, so it's just a matter of adjusting to the difference in the power, the handling, and basically the manoeuvres that he's had to learn.
Now, Chris was trying in a Westfield, but just to show you, you can do it in any car, even the car you drive every day. While I was directing and not looking, Alastair MOFFATT nicked my car. This basic Nissan Micra is mine, the only adjustments being to tighten the handbrake up, take some weight out of the boot by removing the spare wheel, and taking the wheel trim off. How about that for driving skills? That is the reverse flick, making sure the car moves from one direction to the other seamlessly. And I think my Nissan Micra is holding up quite well. Not quite as manoeuvrable as the Westfield and not as powerful, but a great run. And Alastair still only a teenager, so how did he start?
Well, I've been competing ever since I was 16. I've contested the BTRDA and RAC Championship, first of all in a Vauxhall Nova.
So even with not being on the road with a road licence, you were ripping it up in these auto tests?
Yes, yep, straight out and won first event out, won the class on the first event out, and yeah, no problem.
Common modifications include hydraulic handbrakes and steering knobs, but you really need to only just pump up the tyres and reduce the weight. Make sure your handbrake is all taped up. Let's see how the professionals do it.
And off the line in the Toyo Tyres midget is Malcolm Clark. This MG midget has got a 1275cc engine and in fact got a Toyota gearbox. It's been modified because of the failures normally associated with the old Morris Minor type box that was used in these cars. Apart from that, it's got a limited slip, differential and hydraulic handbrake. Malcolm, who comes from Loughborough in Leicestershire, is a building manager. Been auto testing for at least the last 20 years that I can remember. Very, very experienced, does a lot of events a year. Has won the class for this size of car on several occasions. Coming into the closing stage of the test, very nice run there from Malcolm. And ready on the line for a run in a Westfield that has been prepared probably a little bit more than the one he's been using. Chris Goodwin then having a go in the car previously used by Helen Perrin. It's got a 2-litre Ford engine, 2000E Ford gearbox, hydraulic handbrake and limited slip differential. Apart from that, it's virtually a standard car. It's got the 2-litre Ford overhead cam engine. Chris pops it into reverse gear. Finds it a lot easier to drive than the Z-Tech car he tried first. Very neat remover there. On with the handbrake. Reverses across the line. On with the handbrake again. A little bit of tyre squeal. Really getting the hang of this. He'll be wanting to have a go in this all the time, I think. Auto testing is one of the cheapest forms of motorsport out. Generally, most drivers only get through about 4 tyres a year. A little bit damaging on the transmission if you're careless with it, as Chris seems to be a little bit. Watch the gearbox, Chris. Somebody's got to replace that one day, but not to worry. Notice it's got a knob on the steering wheel. A lot of the drivers tend to use this so that they can twirl the wheel round, and it's a lot easier than shuffling the hands around the wheel as Chris was doing in the orange car.
Now, Chris, you've had your day of fun. How was it?
It was great fun. That's true, and it's been a very busy day. It's not the most straightforward thing in the world to learn how to do this auto testing, but it's a really physical game. There's so much to do all the time. It's just been great fun.
What are the benefits, do you think?
Apart from having a lot of fun and getting out and meeting other people and socialising, the real benefits are in improving your degree of car control. And that has obviously benefits on the road, but it also has benefits if you progress into other branches of motorsport, such as rallies or racing.
Now, I've spoken to a few people here today, and the main thing from them is the cost has been an important factor.
That's
Why
right.
do you think you've not got more people involved?
I think it's a matter of educating the public to how affordable auto testing really is. To do a full season at national championship level is probably not going to cost more than £1,000 if you've already got the car. To go in circuit racing, you're talking of tens of thousands of pounds.
Well, there you have it. You see, it's that simple. So if you want to take an auto test, then this is all you have to do.
Yes, as we said, auto testing is a cheap and convenient way to start your motorsport career. 2 major championships, the RAC MSA Run 1 and the BTR DA Run Championship. Club events will cost you about £7.50 up to a maximum of £20. And national championship events are about £20 a throw. All that information, of course, on our webpage. Next week in Startline, so you want to start racing, you've got to get yourself some kit. Everything from gloves to boots to suits to helmets. Everything you want to know. From pulpits to cockpit and often back again in the same day, the man whose dog collar is sewn into his Nomex overalls, Barry Whitehead. Motorsport and God, does it sit well together?
If you want a theological explanation, I would argue that all the world is the concern of God, and therefore presumably that must include motorsport. But that's not why I got into it. I mean, I got into it because, I don't know, like everybody else, I suppose. At the age of 8, I was taking my father's lawnmower apart. I got a motorbike. Then I began marshalling, but also helping a friend of mine who had a 1.5 PVT Aston. And I marshalled and mechanic is a posh word, turned up with him all through the 60s. And the back end of the 60s, in 68, he asked me, would I like to go in the Aston? I mean, I'd gone to hill climbs with him, I'd gone to sprints with him, I'd gone to races. He used to go to Silverstone and Alton and those. And he said, did I want to enter the Members' Day? Because I was an associate member of the AOMOC. I can't afford to be it now. But I went to Wiscombe. And I enjoyed myself. And he said, did I want to then have a go later in the year? I drove at Barben in the Aston. He never asked me again. But by then I had a competition licence. What do you do with it? I had a road car. And in those days, there were classes for absolutely bog-standard road cars. OK, so I put a decent cam in it and bigger carburettors and that sort of stuff. It was a BMC 1100 Estate. Not a clever car. I enjoyed it. I had more fun with that car, a year and a half. Then I started building my own.
And of course you're sitting in one of your own
now.
Yes. Does it give you great pleasure to have always built your own cars?
It's a love-hate relationship. When I look at it on the scales and see the weight of it, I think, why on earth am I so stupid as to try and build my own? All my cars are engineered like blacksmiths or plumbers' work. But it's yes, okay. I would never want to buy a car.
Gives you great satisfaction to actually put the nuts and bolts together. And
oh yes.
Did you all the engine tuning yourself and so on?
No, I unbuilt and rebuilt engines up. I'm not an engine builder in that sense. I mean, I will strip them, I'll put them together again. But there's nothing skilled in the way I do it. I do it like most people do, you know.
Most people would associate a vicar with doing weekend work. Does it conflict with your racing?
Well, when I started, I was a full-time industrial chaplain, spent my time in the factories, which meant that weekdays, morning, afternoons, and sometimes even night shifts I used to go in, were always the time when most things happened. I had a number of evening meetings, but not many. But weekends tended to be free. Okay, so I took services, like any clergy who aren't attached to a church do on a Sunday morning. But I tended to have all Saturday free, and most of Sunday.
Now, your daughter's here today, sharing the drive with you. Does that give you great pleasure to see two generations?
Yes. Yes, I mean, it's a great joy when your children join you in your game. It's wonderful.
Well, this is your chance to tell me how good she really is, without her hearing.
Oh, she without her hearing, that thing's stuck in the front there. This is her second season. She's learned now to put the foot down. She's learned to get off the line decently, better than me sometimes. And she's now learning what to do on corners. I gave her, when she started, I gave her 3 seasons to come up to my times. My times aren't very good. I mean, for instance, here, I always lift and sometimes even dab the brakes on that top right-hander, and I shouldn't. That's when my times disappear. I'm a coward, basically. An old man, you see, it's my privilege as an old man.
We're keeping you at Motorsports head on for a second here. How would you like to see extra promotion for things like hills and sprints? Because you need to always bring in the young people to do this sort of thing.
I think it's hard to start now, harder to start, because there's not so much opportunity. I may be wrong on that. The class structure, I'm not sure it's as kind as it was back in the late 60s.
Do you miss those days, back in the late 60s? Or is Club Motorsport still very similar now?
Oh, it's very similar. I mean, the people are similar. I mean, I've been in this class, the 1100 single-seaters, since 73. My first car was technically a 2-seater. It was an autocross special, which I never autocrossed, but there we are. It looked horrible. I'll ignore that one. But I've been in this class since 72 or 73. That's the 1100 single-seaters. But it's the same class, the same sort of people, the same approach, you know. And I mean, the odd thing with our game, and maybe it is in other forms of motorsport too, though people who go circuiting say it's much less common. I mean, if I had an engine problem, half my fellow competitors in the same class would do what they could to get it, you know, to get it right. And people will lend you anything. It's wonderful. It's an enormous sense. There's no cutthroat. Now, whether there is with the big boys, I don't think so either. But in our game, no. We share everything. It's wonderful.
This week, for our look behind motorsport, we join Phoenix Rescue Services, the people who spend their entire weekends out helping people for nothing. Peter Lawton of Phoenix Rescue Services. It's a bit of a full-time occupation, this really, isn't it?
It seems to be at the moment. I think every weekend for about 8 months we're out giving support and safety cover on rallies, races, hill climbs, sprints about the UK.
Does it run all throughout the year, or do you have your busiest time in the summer, I suppose?
We try to take a break in December and January, but there's some events, rallies, races going on somewhere in the country all year. Heaviest time is really March to November.
Now, when people go to a race meeting or they go to a rally and they're out there spectating, they see the rescue services around. They probably don't realise that you're entirely voluntary, aren't you?
We're entirely voluntary. There are some units that are provided by organising clubs, but a vast number, and most of those on rallies, are independents, just provided by enthusiasts who've probably been marshals or competitors in the past. You call in a lot of debts and favours from people, and then in most cases organisers will give a donation or a fee for the attendance of the vehicle, and we plough that back into buying more and more equipment. And in some cases sponsors who are interested in motorsport will assist us with equipment as well.
In financial terms, how much kit do you actually lug around?
In financial terms, I think we're insured for about £40,000, and then the vehicle as well.
Now, how does the unit actually operate? I mean, you're trained in certain disciplines, obviously, and what are those?
Yeah, we're trained. We carry on a rally 2 or 3 trained extrication technicians. We'll cut the car apart if we need to make access, and we carry a medical officer, usually a paramedic or a full qualified doctor, and he'll control the medical side of any extrication that's required. And we'll make the holes, make the access, casualty handling, packaging, transport to hospital or to an ambulance or helicopter RV point. I work full-time during the week. We all have full-time jobs. We prepare the vehicle evenings and weekends when we're not out, and then we come away at the weekend. It's just the end development of deep involvement in motorsport and marshalling. It's, in our view, pinnacle almost.
How does the training work then? Because again, being voluntary and you're giving up your own time, somebody has to train you somehow, and where does that time and money come from, and support to do it?
The RAC have a training trust which funds some training days. I'm an RAC qualified trainer for rescue, and there are a dozen more around the country. And in the off-season we organise training events at racecourses or forests, and we'll collect cars, crash them with a JCB, put them in compromised positions, put casualties in them, make the casualties up, and then send rescue crews in to carry out a full extrication. And we run classroom sessions as well, and for trainees on a unit we actually train them in the use of equipment every time that we're out. The stuff has to be regularly checked, so we might as well use that as a training exercise.
And I suppose just like any other emergency rescue service that runs to the highest standards, you have to be assessed regularly and by presumably professional assessors.
We have to renew our licences. We're licensed officials for the RAC, and we renew our licences every other year when there is an assessment weekend held. This particular unit, we're qualified to do race and rally. We can do all motorsport events, and so we go to Donington in the Midlands every 2 years, and there are incidents set up for us which are blind. We'll be scrambled down to it, and there'll be a mechanical assessor and a medical assessor there who watch our progress as we go through what to us at that time is a very real incident.
Do you think there's a problem, or is there a problem with public perception of you? Do they realise you're volunteers and so much time goes into it?
The public don't realise it, competitors don't realise it. Go out on a rally quite often and somebody say, oh, the RAC provide all that for you. And when you point out that no, it's actually privately owned or owned by a club, it's quite a surprise. And they also think that we're full-time paid officials, which again we're not. So you have to be slightly soft in the head to get involved in this.
How do we go about then raising the profile of these volunteer units, and what would you like to see done to help you from the competitive world here to the public who are going out to spectate?
I think probably just for people to pass on the word and say, you know, these guys really do know what they're doing, they're an essential part. We do a lot of work with motor clubs. We go, I think most of the rescue units now, with motor clubs in their home area, go and do shows, publicity, training. We just want to be out at a weekend and not have to do anything. The ideal day for us is to go out, watch motorsport and never touch anything in the vehicle. If we have to actually do something, it means somebody else's weekend has been spoilt, and we don't like that.
Back at Mallory Park, This is the sound, so they say, of classic thunder. Rover SD1 setting the early pace, and look at that, that's the Batmobile. The 3-litre CSL BMW, that's an ex-Works car done the Nürburgring 1000K and various other races. That's a Vauxhall Ferenz, haven't seen one of those for ages. Opel Ascona. Some of these guys really know how to drive, and the diminutive NSU. Rather cute, really. Nice to see a Saab in this lineup. Saab 99, we don't see many of those, but you can see the leading car has almost caught the back markers already. Look how much smoke is coming off that car as he tries to brake and turn in and avoid being taken at the same time. Lotus Cortina of Tranton there. Right, mixed bag in this class. Anything from the Lotus Cortina to the Dolomite again, as we can see. Mark 1 Escorts, and this is an absolutely glorious sight. Getting past the SD1 and in fact taking the honours in that race. And if anybody's listening now and wants to give me one for my birthday, I'll quite happily accept it. Everybody came, of course, not only to see those cars, but to see some of these as well. These are the pre-63s, wonderful array of cars. There's the poor old Dawson expired Mini being cooled down. A lot of Morris Minors this year. Highly competitive car, people tend to forget that they were raced with great success. And Jaguars always a stalwart. But because it's a handicapping system in this class, we caught up with this year's current champion. He's a Morris Minor driver, Reg Solway of Bristol.
For some of the younger viewers of this particular section of the programme, they might not associate the Morris Minor with racing, but of course it's got a pretty good history of racing, hasn't it?
I think it has. The car I've got has been racing for more than 50% of its life. If my maths is correct, someone I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a 1957 two-door Morris Minor, and it was part of, or taken into the Classic Saloon Car Championship in 1975 when the Classic Saloon Car Club first started off.
So this is one of the oldest cars actually out here racing, I mean within the club itself?
Yes, it is. There's quite a few people in the club who will say they've owned it or driven it at some stage, and most people can remember seeing it back in the 70s and early 80s, and it's had many drivers. And, you know, people have come along and said it's nice to see that car winning a championship. And for me, last year was my first year of racing. I obviously bought a good car, which was very forgiving. You know, you could buy a car which was hard work and would have made my first season difficult. But a nice, easygoing car behaved itself and forgiven me one or two mistakes. And I ended up winning the Classic Saloon Championship with it.
Well, I mean, obviously, doing minors for a living as well as a hobby. Don't you ever sit there and think, wouldn't mind stepping up to something really big and hairy like a Mustang or something like that?
No. Is that short enough an answer for you?
Well, yep, that was a short enough answer for me, Reg. Now, if you don't fancy some of the classics, or don't want to build up a Thunder Saloon, once or another, what about the MGs? There are plenty of these Maestros and Montegos in MG form knocking around. Possibly under 1,000 will pick you one up, and it won't take you much more to get it ready to race. And extremely competitive and very close stuff it is too. This really is stuff for the whole family, and it's never too young to start motor racing, that's what I say. Well, as you can see, the racing carries on behind me, but sadly that's all we have time for this week on Wheelbase Club. Join us in 2 weeks' time. I'll leave you with a sneak preview of what's coming on then. Until then, goodbye. In Star Turn, it's the man most likely to become Britain's next Formula One World Champion, despite his off at Silverstone, David Coulthard. Our featured event is One Make Racing. We travel all the way to the Isle of Man with the Westfields. And in Start Line, it's getting yourself together for sprinting. And our spectacular race roundup action comes from the hill rallying in Scotland. The rumbling and mighty V8s. That's all from us. Hope you've enjoyed the show, from myself and the rest of the team. Catch you next time. Goodbye.